Have you ever felt that eerie shiver when someone says, they predicted it centuries ago? Tonight, that feeling will be your companion. The Mayans were not just builders of stone pyramids or keepers of ancient calendars, they were dreamers who believed time itself could whisper truths about the future. And some of those whispers still rattle our bones today. But before we take this journey together, let us pause. Give this video a like, tell me in the comments where you are watching from, and subscribe if you are ready. Only if you are truly ready to stay awake a little longer, to let your imagination wander, and to risk carrying a few strange questions into your dreams tonight. Are you prepared? Good. Let us step into the shadows of history. Close your eyes and picture it. You are walking in the dense jungle of Central America, surrounded by vines thicker than your arm, the cries of unseen birds echoing like ghosts. Suddenly, a clearing reveals a pyramid, its steps rising sharply into the clouds. The stones are weathered, carved with symbols you cannot read but somehow feel. Symbols that promise to tell you not just where you are, but when. Time for the Mayans was alive. It was not marching forward like a soldier. It was circling back like a serpent eating its own tail. Now imagine priests dressed in feathers and jade, climbing those steps to stand against the horizon. The sun sinks, shadows stretch, and as torches flicker, they declare what the gods have revealed. Storms will come, wars will erupt, and a cycle will end. Their words are not guesses, they are certainties, etched into stone and memory. The question is not whether you believe them, it is whether you are willing to hear what they dared to say. We laugh sometimes at prophecies. Remember the panic in 2012, when people stocked up on canned beans and duct tape because the Mayan calendar ended. It turned out the world did not collapse, unless you count your cousin's marriage, which maybe should not have lasted past 2012 anyway, but behind that joke lies a deeper truth. The Mayans did predict endings. Not a single apocalypse, but countless endings woven into cycles. Civilizations rise, civilizations fall. And does not that sound familiar when you scroll through today's news? As you listen tonight, keep one thought close. Perhaps prophecy is not about predicting a single date on the calendar, but about teaching us how to see the patterns. Maybe the Mayans were not fortune tellers, but storytellers, warning us to pay attention when history starts to rhyme. And if they were right, then their whispers might not belong to the past at all. They might be warnings for us. Step into the world of the Mayans, and you enter a universe ruled not by kings or warriors, but by time. Time was their ultimate ruler. It shaped their rituals, their cities, even their wars. To them, every moment was part of an infinite cycle, repeating yet transforming. The Mayans believed that if you learned to read the rhythm of time, you could predict not just eclipses and harvests, but the very fate of humanity. The jewel of their wisdom was the long count calendar. Imagine a calendar so vast that it stretches across thousands of years, mapping out cycles called baktuns, each lasting 394 years. It was not designed to hang on your kitchen wall. It was meant to hold the destiny of civilizations. Priests used it to decide when to crown kings, when to start wars, and when to plant maize. To them, dates were not just numbers. They were keys unlocking the flow of cosmic energy. And yet, centuries later, one date, December 21, 2012, caused modern humanity to panic. Remember the news? Shelters were built. People emptied grocery stores. Some spent their savings on bunkers, while others threw wild end-of-the-world parties. And then, nothing happened. Or did it? Because perhaps the prophecy was never about a physical end, but about transformation. The cycle closed, and another began. And if you look around, does not it feel like something shifted after 2012? Technology, culture, even the way we fear the future. Everything feels like a new chapter. Their calendar was not superstition. It was astronomy disguised as spirituality. Without telescopes, they tracked Venus to a precision that rivals modern science. For the Mayans, Venus was not just a planet, it was a warrior star, a harbinger of war or peace. When Venus rose in the morning sky, kings sharpened their swords, believing conflict was inevitable. Can you imagine living in a world where the stars told you when to go to battle? And would you feel safer, or more afraid? The genius of the Maya lies in this paradox. They tied the sacred to the scientific. Their calendars were both mathematical marvels and spiritual roadmaps. And maybe that is why they fascinate us today. They remind us that the search for meaning, whether through numbers or myths, is universal. For the Mayans, silence did not exist. Every clap of thunder, every flicker of starlight, every shadow cast across their temples was a voice. The gods were always speaking. The challenge was listening. Priests devoted their lives to becoming interpreters of these divine messages. They fasted, bled themselves in rituals, inhaled smoke that blurred the line between reality and vision. They were not trying to predict lottery numbers. They were trying to understand the will of the cosmos. To them, prophecy was not fortune-telling, it was dialogue. One chilling tale tells of a priest who declared that rivers would dry and maize, the sacred lifeblood of the Maya, would vanish. People mocked him. Then drought scorched the land, and laughter turned to desperation. Sound familiar? It is the same way we roll our eyes at climate warnings until floods swallow our neighborhoods. But the Mayans did not see prophecy as doom alone. In every vision of destruction there was a seed of renewal. If a city burned, another would rise. If crops failed, new rituals would restore balance. To them, an ending was never final, it was a doorway. And that is why their prophecies, even the darkest ones, carried hope. Imagine standing in a jungle plaza at night, thousands of years ago. Torches blaze, drums thunder, and the priest announces that the gods demand change. Would you laugh, would you tremble, or would you feel, as the Mayans did, that the universe itself was whispering to you? Picture the night sky over the jungles of the Yucatan more than 1,000 years ago. Stars glitter above, brighter than you have ever seen in our modern, light-polluted world. The Mayans believed that the heavens were not silent decoration. They were messages written in fire. Among their prophecies was one particularly chilling. The sky itself would one day fall. What could that possibly mean to a civilization that watched the skies with obsessive devotion? The sudden streak of a comet or the flaming descent of a meteor was not simply a natural event. It was a warning. And you and I know that sometimes it was. Around the year 536 CE, volcanic eruptions filled the skies with ash, plunging parts of the world into darkness. Crops failed, famine spread, empires weakened. Imagine living through that with no satellites, no news reports, only the sight of the sun dimming and the stars refusing to shine. Would you not believe the sky itself was collapsing? Mayan inscriptions speak of fiery serpents crossing the heavens. Scholars today connect those serpents to meteors and comets, like Halley's Comet, which appeared multiple times during their civilization's height. To the Maya, these were not harmless streaks of light. They were omens. A fiery serpent meant bloodshed, disease, or the death of kings. A falling star was a falling crown. Now think of the asteroid that struck Earth 66 million years ago, wiping out the dinosaurs. That impact happened in the Yucatan, the very land the Maya would one day inhabit. Did their myths carry echoes of that ancient catastrophe? Perhaps their ancestors remembered, through stories passed down, the day the world burned. What if prophecy is sometimes not prediction, but memory disguised as warning? Of course, today we laugh nervously about doomsday asteroids. NASA tracks near-Earth objects. Hollywood makes movies where Bruce Willis saves us with a drill. But here's the unsettling truth: the Maya were not entirely wrong. The sky really can fall, meteors still strike, volcanoes still darken skies. And if one day you looked up to see a ball of fire racing toward Earth, would you not suddenly wish you had listened to those ancient whispers? Few prophecies have stirred as much global hysteria as the so-called Mayan apocalypse of 2012. You remember it. News anchors smirked while survivalists dug bunkers. Teenagers joked about skipping homework because the world might end. Hollywood cashed in with disaster movies. For months the world held its breath, waiting for a clock carved in stone to strike midnight. But what did the Maya actually say? Their long count calendar was never a ticking time bomb. It was a wheel. And on December 21, 2012, one great cycle, called a Baktun, ended. The next day, another cycle began, just as naturally as turning a page in your planner. If you have ever panicked because your calendar ends on December 31st, you will understand the joke. The Maya never predicted a fiery doom. They predicted renewal. Still, the fascination reveals something about us. Why did millions cling to the idea of a world ending? Maybe because deep down we know endings come. Empires crumble, ecosystems collapse, even relationships fade. The Mayans tapped into that universal fear, not by accident but by design. By embedding endings into their sacred calendar, they forced people to confront the impermanence of life. On that December night in 2012, people gathered at Mayan temples in Mexico and Guatemala. Some prayed, some meditated, others danced, waiting for lightning or fire. Instead, dawn came gently, birds sang, the world continued, but many who were there described a strange feeling, not disappointment but transformation. As if the cycle had truly turned, not in the earth but in themselves. And here's the twist: after 2012, our world did change. Technology accelerated, smartphones, social media, AI reshaped daily life. Politics grew more chaotic. Climate disasters more frequent. It almost feels like a new age began, even if no fireball announced it. So maybe the Mayans were right after all. Maybe December 21st, 2012 was not the end of the world, but the end of a world. The old one we thought we understood. Walk into any ancient Mayan city, Tikal, Palenque, Copan, and you will find walls that do not just hold buildings, they hold secrets. Every stone block is carved with symbols, known as glyphs, a language of gods and kings. And within these carvings are not just stories of battles and dynasties, but warnings, prophecies chiseled into eternity. Imagine running your fingers across those grooves, tracing shapes that once meant fear or hope. Some inscriptions tell of droughts that would last for years, of cities destined to crumble, of rulers fated to die young. For the Maya, writing was not passive record-keeping. It was magic. To carve words into stone was to bind fate itself. One carving in Copan describes a king who performed great rituals to prevent catastrophe. He spilled blood, burned offerings, begged the gods. Yet the glyphs say disaster came anyway. It is a chilling reminder: prophecy was not always meant to be avoided. Sometimes it was meant to be endured. Modern archaeologists pore over these glyphs like detectives, piecing together fragments. They find warnings of famine linked to real droughts in the 9th century, which helped collapse Mayan cities. They find hints of wars triggered not just by politics but by cosmic signs, like eclipses or the appearance of Venus. Imagine living in a world where even the stars demanded war. Would you feel guided by the heavens or trapped by them? Today, when tourists snap selfies in front of these temples, most do not realize they are standing before stone newspapers announcing disasters. It is like taking a vacation photo in front of a carved headline. Drought will kill thousands. The irony is dark, but also strangely funny. Because we humans still ignore warnings etched in stone, whether they are ancient glyphs or modern climate reports. The hidden warnings of the Maya remind us that prophecy is not just prediction, it is reflection. They were not only foretelling the future. They were holding up a mirror, forcing their people to see the fragility of their world. And maybe, just maybe, those stone whispers are still speaking to us. The Mayans believed the sun was not just a blazing ball of fire. It was a living heart that demanded nourishment. Without it, crops would wither, rivers would vanish, and the entire cosmic order would collapse. And what could possibly feed the sun human blood? Picture yourself standing in a Mayan plaza. Thousands gather under the searing midday heat. Priests, dressed in shimmering feathers and jade, climb the steps of a towering pyramid. Trumpets of conch shells blare. The crowd grows silent as a captive is led forward, trembling, knowing that his life is about to be poured into the sky. The priest raises a blade of obsidian, sharper than steel, and with one swift motion, opens the chest. The heart still beating is lifted high, a crimson offering to the gods. To the Mayans, this was not cruelty, it was survival. These rituals horrify us today, yet they were deeply connected to prophecy. The Mayans believed that the cycles of the sun, its eclipses, its fiery patterns, foretold whether the world would thrive or collapse. A solar eclipse was never just a shadow, it was a warning that the gods were hungry. Without sacrifice, the sun might never rise again. Science tells us the sun is powered by nuclear fusion, not blood. But imagine living without that knowledge. If the sun vanished, you froze. If it scorched too hot, you starved. The logic is brutal but strangely rational. Feed the sun or die. Prophecy became justification, a sacred contract that kept the people obedient and the priests powerful. And yet, within these dark rituals lies an unsettling mirror. Don't we still make sacrifices to keep our sun alive? We burn forests, drill oil, pollute skies, all to feed the glowing heart of modern civilization, electricity, industry, endless consumption. The Mayans offered blood. We offer the earth itself, which is the greater horror. So the prophecy of the sun was not just about eclipses. It was about the eternal truth that survival demands a price. And whether that price is a single life on a pyramid, or an entire planet sacrificed to progress, the question remains, how much are we willing to give to keep the light burning for the Mayans? War was not just fought with spears and arrows, it was fought with calendars. Battles began not when armies were ready, but when the stars declared it so. Time itself was a battlefield, and kings were its soldiers. Imagine you are a young warrior in a Mayan city. You rise at dawn, body painted in red and black, obsidian blade in hand, your stomach knots with fear. But you do not march until the priest lifts his eyes to Venus. Only when the morning star appears do you move. The prophecy says this battle is fated, written in the heavens long before you were born. Do you fight bravely, or do you tremble, knowing your fate may already be sealed? The Mayans believed cycles of time carried cycles of war. Every 52 years, when their calendar round reset, they performed desperate rituals to ensure the world would not end. Fire was extinguished in every home. Darkness spread across the cities. Only when the sacred flame was rekindled did life continue. Imagine the tension. Entire civilizations waiting in silence, wondering if dawn would return. Wars themselves were often framed as fulfillments of prophecy. A king who launched an invasion did not say, "I want more land." He said, "The gods demand this war." And when victory came, it was proof the prophecy was true. When defeat came, well, clearly someone had failed to honor the gods properly. Prophecy was both excuse and explanation, a cosmic insurance policy for the throne. But war was also theater. Prisoners were paraded, sacrificed, their blood feeding the sun and the cycle. For the common soldier, prophecy meant you were part of something larger than life. For the rulers, it meant control. The gods and calendars gave divine legitimacy to human ambition. And perhaps the scariest part, the idea has not vanished. Today, wars are still justified with destiny, ideology, or greater purpose. The names change, the weapons change, but the rhythm, the prophecy of endless conflict remains. Not all Mayan prophets stood atop pyramids. Some walked among the people, disguised as healers, shamans, or simple villagers. They were the dreamers. The ones who claimed the gods spoke to them in visions, in the smoke of incense, in the cries of birds. To the Mayans, prophecy could be hidden anywhere. In the stars, in the stones, even in the words of a stranger you met in the marketplace. Imagine buying maize from a quiet old woman, only to hear her whisper, "Beware the coming drought." Would you laugh, or would you wonder if the gods had chosen her as a messenger in a world where the divine was everywhere? Anyone could be a prophet. These figures often used hallucinogenic rituals, consuming plants that blurred reality into visions. They would describe cities burning, rivers drying, or kings falling long before such events happened. Were they simply hallucinating? Or did their altered states allow them to see patterns invisible to others? Modern science suggests psychedelics can expand perception, helping the brain connect dots it normally ignores. Maybe prophecy was less about magic, more about extraordinary intuition. But prophecy also brought danger. A shaman whose words displeased a king might be silenced, sometimes permanently, yet the people still listened in whispers, passing warnings through rumor and story. In this way, prophecy spread like smoke, curling through society whether rulers liked it or not. And here's where we laugh at ourselves. Even today, we have prophets in disguise. They do not wear feathers or jade. They write blogs, tweet predictions, or speak on podcasts. Sometimes they are crackpots. Sometimes they are visionaries. And just like in the Mayan world, we never really know which is which until history proves them right or wrong. To the Mayans, an eclipse was not a beautiful scientific event. It was terror made real. Imagine the sun, the great blazing heart of the universe, suddenly swallowed in darkness. Birds stop singing, the air chills, shadows twist unnaturally across temples. For us, an eclipse is an Instagram opportunity. For them, it was a prophecy fulfilled, a warning that cosmic balance was unraveling. The Mayans recorded eclipses with astonishing precision. Priests knew when they would come, down to the very day. But knowledge did not erase fear. In fact, it amplified it. Because if you knew the shadow was coming, you also knew it carried meaning. To the Mayans, an eclipse was the gods speaking in the most dramatic way possible. It might mean a king would die, or a famine would strike, or war would begin. During eclipses, the people panicked. Priests led rituals, shouting prayers, burning incense, even offering blood to feed the sun and ensure it would return. Imagine the collective sigh of relief as the light reappeared, as though the gods had accepted the sacrifice and given back the day. What makes this so fascinating is how prophecy and science blurred. The priests predicted eclipses through mathematics, yet they explained them through divine will. Both were true in their world. And here's the twist: are not we guilty of the same today? Scientists warn us about climate change, pandemics, rising seas. We nod, but when disaster strikes, we still ask, why us? Why now? We look for meaning even when science gives us data. There is also humor in the fear. Imagine a villager muttering, "Really? The sun's gone again. Didn't we sacrifice enough goats last time?" Fear makes people superstitious. But it also makes them laugh nervously, the same way we laugh at horror movies today. The Mayans may have been terrified, but they were also human. The eclipse prophecies remind us of a universal truth. When the world goes dark, literally or metaphorically, we crave light. We crave reassurance that tomorrow will come. And maybe that is why these stories still echo. Because deep down, every one of us has faced an eclipse of fear, those moments when hope seems swallowed, and prayed for the light to return. Among the Mayans, fire was sacred. It was warmth, light, survival. But it was also destruction. Their prophecies often spoke of flames consuming cities, of ash raining from the sky. To them, fire was both gift and curse, an element that could sustain life or erase it. Archaeologists believe many of these fire prophecies were tied to volcanic eruptions. Central America sits on the Ring of Fire, a chain of volcanoes that could erupt without warning. Imagine living in a city where one morning the horizon glows red, the ground shakes, and a cloud of ash darkens the sun. For the Maya, such terror could only be divine judgment. Some inscriptions describe entire kingdoms falling under showers of black snow, crops withered, rivers clogged, people fled carrying children through fields of ash. These events were remembered as fulfillments of prophecy, proof that the gods had spoken. And science tells us they were not wrong. Volcanic eruptions truly can change history. In 536 CE, eruptions plunged much of the world into darkness for over a year, leading to famines that reshaped empires. The Maya may have witnessed similar events, translating them into prophecy, and when those prophecies came true, their power deepened. There is something terrifyingly familiar here. Haven't we seen skies filled with smoke from wildfires, entire towns swallowed by flames? Haven't we watched ash cover cities in modern eruptions? Like Mount St. Helens or Eyjafjallajökull in Iceland, we no longer call it divine wrath, but the fear remains. The prophecy of fire and ash lives on. Of course, the Maya also found humor in fire. One tale tells of villagers who, during an eruption, shouted at the mountain as though scolding a drunken uncle. Enough already, we get it. Fear and laughter are siblings, both born when we face the uncontrollable. The Mayans mastered both, so when we hear their prophecies of fire, we should not dismiss them as primitive superstition. They were observations, warnings, and reflections of a truth we still live with. Fire gives, and fire takes away, and in that balance lies the fragile fate of civilizations. The Mayans loved games, but theirs were not for fun alone. The sacred ball game known as Pak was part sport, part ritual, part prophecy. Imagine a stone court flanked by high walls, crowds shouting as players strike a heavy rubber ball with their hips, shoulders, or thighs. Never their hands. The ball echoes like thunder, a heartbeat of destiny. To the Mayans, this game symbolized cosmic struggle, day against night, life against death, gods against demons. Every match carried meaning, sometimes even tied to prophecies. Victories were seen as signs of divine favor. Defeats could be omens of disaster, and in the most extreme rituals, the losers, or sometimes the winners, were sacrificed to the gods. Imagine being so good at sports that your reward was death. Talk about pressure. One inscription describes a match played to predict the future of a city. If the home team won, prosperity would continue. If they lost, famine or invasion might follow. Imagine being the poor guy who missed the winning shot and doomed his people. Sorry everyone, I slipped on sweat. Not exactly the kind of mistake you want on record for eternity. But the ball game was not just ritual. It was entertainment, a way for people to gather, to cheer, to laugh. Prophecy blended with play. The people could release their fears in shouts and laughter, while priests whispered of destiny. In that way, sport became a bridge between survival and joy. Today, archaeologists still stand in those stone courts, whispering, clapping their hands to hear the echoes. The game is gone, but the sense of fate lingers. It reminds us that even in play, humans have always sought meaning. Maybe every game, every contest is a tiny prophecy of its own, a struggle that reflects the larger battles of life. In the heart of the Mayan world, forests were more than scenery. They were temples without walls, living cathedrals where God spoke through rustling leaves and whispering rivers. Yet the Mayans also carried prophecies that warned of silence, the day when the forests would fall quiet, when no birds would sing, when the rivers would dry. To them, this was not just environmental loss. It was the unraveling of cosmic harmony. Imagine walking through a jungle alive with howler monkeys, toucans, and jaguars, only to return years later to find silence, no birdsong, no flowing water, just dead trees and choking dust. The Mayans saw such silence as a curse, a prophecy that foretold famine and collapse. And chillingly, that prophecy came true. Archaeologists studying the fall of the Mayan cities have found evidence of deforestation and drought. The people cut down trees to build temples and fuel fires. Without trees, the soil dried. Without rain, crops failed, population shrank. Cities once alive with markets and music became ghost towns. The prophecy of silent forests was not superstition. It was ecological truth written in myth. Picture yourself as a farmer in that world. You wake one morning and the forest around your field feels different, less alive, more brittle. Do you keep planting, hoping the gods will bless your maize? Or do you fear that the prophecy is unfolding, that your children may never know the sound of birds again? Today, the silence still spreads. We see forests burning in the Amazon, ice melting in the Arctic, species disappearing. The Mayans may not have known the science, but they knew the feeling. When the natural world falls silent, humanity trembles. And perhaps that is the most haunting part. Their prophecies were not just for their time. They echo for ours. The question is, are we listening to the silence before it is too late? One of the most mysterious Mayan prophecies spoke of the return of a great serpent. This was no ordinary snake. It was Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, a figure shared with their neighbors, the Aztecs. To the Mayans, the serpent was a symbol of cycles, death and rebirth, descent and return. Its prophecy was clear. The serpent would one day come back, and with it, a new age. Picture a temple wall carved with scales and feathers. Pilgrims climb steep steps to honor a god who is both bird and snake, sky and earth. Priests whisper that when the serpent returns, kings will fall, cities will change, the world itself will shift. No one knew if that shift would mean salvation or destruction. Some scholars believe this prophecy referred to astronomical cycles. The serpent's body was the Milky Way, its movements mirrored by stars across the sky. When the Milky Way rose in a certain alignment, the serpent was said to return. Others believe it was political, a prophecy that one day foreign rulers would come, changing everything. And indeed, centuries later, when Spanish conquistadors arrived, some Mayans thought the serpent prophecy had come true. Pale men in armor, sailing ships that looked like floating serpents, bringing fire, disease, and conquest. The prophecy of the serpent's return was fulfilled, but not in the way they expected. But perhaps the serpent prophecy is timeless. Don't we all live in cycles of return? Old habits resurface, old powers rise again. History repeats itself. Sometimes with feathers, sometimes with fangs. The Mayans were not simply predicting a god's return. They were reminding us nothing is ever gone forever. Everything comes back, sometimes more terrifying than before. Perhaps the most haunting prophecy of all is the one the Mayans seem to speak about themselves, the prophecy of collapse. Imagine a people so wise in calendars, astronomy, and architecture, yet leaving behind deserted cities swallowed by jungle. Did they predict their own fall? Inscriptions hint at it. Some texts speak of droughts that would not end, of rulers losing favor with the gods, of cities destined to crumble. Archaeologists find evidence of exactly that. Prolonged drought, overpopulation, warfare, environmental strain. The prophecies were not abstract. They were warnings ignored. Picture yourself as a Mayan noble in the 9th century. You see markets empty, rivers shrinking, temples abandoned. The priests whisper that cycles are ending, that the gods demand sacrifice. Do you cling to rituals? Do you cut down the last forests to build one more temple? Or do you admit that the prophecy is not mystical at all, but practical? No society can grow forever. What chills us today is how familiar it feels. The Mayans may have written their collapse into prophecy, but we write ours into climate models. Economic forecasts, warnings we scroll past online. They inscribe their fate on stone, we inscribe ours on digital screens, and in both cases, the question remains, will anyone listen? The collapse foretold is not just history. It is a mirror. It reminds us that civilizations end not in sudden explosions, but in slow silences, forests gone, rivers dry, faith fading. The Maya told that story in advance, we are living it now. The Mayans feared the sky like no other people. They revered its beauty, worshipped its cycles, and yet dreaded its silence. One of their darker prophecies spoke of a black sky, a time when the heavens would turn to ink, stars would vanish, and the world would stumble in blindness. Imagine standing in the jungle as night falls, only to find that it is darker than dark. No stars, no moon, just endless black pressing down like a suffocating blanket. To us the thought is poetic. To the Mayans it was death itself. The black sky meant famine, war, or even the end of time. What could have inspired such a prophecy? Scientists point to real events. Volcanic eruptions can cast ash into the atmosphere, blotting out the sun and stars for months. Dust storms, fires, even meteor impacts can do the same. Imagine the terror of villagers looking up at a sky with no light at all. For a civilization that read meaning in every flicker of starlight, the absence of light was a prophecy fulfilled. Some Mayan texts describe nights when the sky had no eyes. To them, the stars were eyes of the gods. If the eyes closed, the gods had turned away. A chilling thought, that the universe itself could abandon you, and yet, even in this darkness, the Mayans found patterns. They believed the black sky was not the end, but a reset. When light returned, it meant renewal. Darkness then was a womb as much as a tomb, a place where endings gave birth to beginnings. Today, we still fear black skies. We fear blackouts, nuclear winter, the collapse of satellites that guide our lives. We fear a future where the stars are hidden not by gods, but by our own pollution. Perhaps the Mayans knew what we still struggle to admit. When the sky goes black, it is not only light we lose. It is hope. In the Yucatan Peninsula, great sinkholes dot the land. To us, they are geological wonders. To the Mayans, they were portals, doors to the underworld. Known as Xibalba, these cenotes, deep pools of water, were sacred places where offerings were thrown, where prayers echoed, and where prophecies lived. Imagine standing at the edge of a cenote, its water black and endless, reflecting the sky like a mirror. Priests cast offerings into its depths, jade, gold, even human lives. The splash was not just a sound, it was a message delivered to the gods below. The Mayans believed that cenotes were mouths of the earth, places where the living could speak to the dead. Prophecies drawn from these waters carried enormous weight. Some rituals involved gazing into the cenote until visions appeared, visions of wars, droughts, or rebirth. Was it imagination, hallucination, or something deeper? The mind opening itself to mysteries we still can't explain. Archaeologists have recovered thousands of artifacts from cenotes, ceramics, jewelry, bones. Among them, inscriptions that warn of floods, famine, or the wrath of gods. It is as if the cenotes themselves whispered fate, but cenotes were not only feared, they were also sources of life, giving fresh water in a land where rivers often vanished. Here lies the paradox. The same portals to death also sustained survival. The gods of Xibalba could curse, but they could also bless. Today, tourists swim in cenotes, laughing as sunlight dances on the water. Few realize they are floating in what the Maya saw as the gates of the underworld. Would you dive so cheerfully if you thought spirits were watching from below? The prophecy of the cenotes teaches us that the line between life and death, blessing and curse, is thin as water's surface, and sometimes, to glimpse the future, you must dare to peer into the depths. For the Mayans, bones were not silent relics. They were voices, skulls, femurs, ribs. These were instruments of prophecy, in rituals both sacred and eerie. Bones were burned, carved, or cast like dice, each crack and shadow a message from the gods. Imagine a priest sitting before a fire, dropping bones into the flames. As they pop and split, he leans in, eyes wide, declaring that the gods have spoken. War is coming, or drought, or death. To the people gathered around, the sound of snapping bone was as clear as thunder. It was destiny cracking open. The Maya also carved bones with inscriptions, using them as sacred texts. Some bones told of future battles. Others warned of famines. Holding such an object was like holding a prophecy in your hand. Archaeologists today study these bones, marveling at how they combined art, ritual, and warning. But bones were not only read, they were given. Sacrificed captives had their remains cast into cenotes, their spirits believed to carry messages to the gods. In this way, the dead became prophets, their silence filled with divine words. And yet bones also carried humor in folklore. One tale says a mischievous shaman claimed he could make skeletons talk. Villagers laughed when he pretended to hear gossip from a rib. Ah yes, your neighbor owes you maize. Fear and laughter intertwined, making the ritual both terrifying and strangely familiar. Modern science sees bones as records too. DNA, fractures, growth lines, they tell stories of health, struggle, migration. In a way, bones do still speak. Not through prophecy, but through data. Perhaps the Mayans knew this instinctively, that inside the body lies a history, a future, even a warning. The prophecy of bones reminds us that nothing truly dies without leaving a message. The question is whether we have the patience or the courage to listen. The night sky above the Mayan world was never quiet. Stars marched across it like soldiers, planets glowed like wandering lanterns, and every shift in the heavens meant something. The Mayans carried prophecies of wandering stars, celestial bodies whose movements foretold upheaval on Earth. Picture yourself lying on your back in a jungle clearing 1,000 years ago. You look up at Venus, bright and sharp in the pre-dawn sky. To us it is a dazzling planet. To the Mayans it was an omen of war. When Venus rose as the morning star, kings sharpened blades, armies gathered, and battles began. Entire campaigns were planned not by generals but by the stars. Comets terrified them even more. A streak of light across the night was not a pretty shooting star. It was a serpent of fire, a cosmic dagger slicing across the sky. The prophecy said it brought disease, famine, or death to rulers. And when real plague swept through cities, when kings did die unexpectedly, the prophecies seemed undeniable. One inscription tells of a king who delayed his coronation until Venus aligned. He feared ruling under the wrong star would doom his reign. Imagine the tension, an entire kingdom waiting for a planet to approve their leader. And yet, perhaps it was not so different from us checking horoscopes before a big decision, or investors scanning the stock market as though it were a constellation of its own. Science tells us planets move by gravity, not destiny. But prophecy was not about science, it was about pattern, by watching the heavens. The Mayans linked celestial rhythms with earthly events, and honestly they were not wrong. Venus cycles line up with droughts. Comets often precede visible climate disruptions. The wandering stars really did echo life below. Even today, wandering stars still haunt us. Satellites streak across skies, meteors blaze, and we wonder what message do they bring? Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. The Mayans remind us that in every flicker of light above, humans search for meaning and sometimes find it. After the Spanish conquest, the Mayans were silenced, temples burned, codices destroyed, yet whispers of prophecy survived in secret books called the Chilombolan. Written in Mayan language but with Latin script, these texts blended ancient visions with colonial shadows. They are fragile bridges between two worlds. Prophecies too stubborn to die. The Chilombolan speaks of cycles of famine, war, and renewal. Some passages predict foreign conquerors arriving from the east with faces pale like the moon. Others foretell disease that would sweep through villages, a sickness with no cure, for the Mayans who lived through smallpox epidemics and Spanish invasion. These words were not just poetry, they were horror realized. But the books also offered hope. They spoke of rebirth, of a day when Mayan culture would rise again, when the serpent would return, when balance would be restored. Prophecy became resistance, a quiet fire kept alive through centuries of oppression. Imagine holding one of these manuscripts. The pages are fragile. Ink faded, yet each word vibrates with survival. Even when written under colonial watch, the Mayans found ways to encode their vision. They hid warnings, dreams, and jokes within the text, messages for future generations. And here's the haunting twist. Many of the prophecies are still being fulfilled. They speak of a world broken by hunger, a sky filled with strange smoke. A time when men forget the old gods but cannot find peace. Do those not sound like our own headlines? The Chilombolan is proof that prophecy is never silenced. Burn the temples, destroy the codices, conquer the people. But the words remain waiting. And perhaps tonight, by remembering them, we too become part of their prophecy. The Mayans did not build machines of metal. They built machines of the mind. Through ritual, trance, and vision, they believed they could slip the bonds of ordinary time. Some prophecies tell of priests who walked through years as one walks through trees, glimpsing both past and future in a single moment. Imagine sitting in a smoke-filled temple, the air heavy with incense. A shaman chants, his eyes rolling back, his body trembling, suddenly. He speaks in a voice not his own. I see cities burning. I see new men with pale faces. I see a serpent returning. To his listeners, this was not hallucination. It was time itself bending, letting them see beyond the present. Modern science might call it altered consciousness, visions sparked by hallucinogenic plants. But is not that another kind of time travel? The brain leaps forward, imagining futures, connecting dots others miss. Prophecy becomes a way of thinking outside the limits of the now. And here's the fascinating part. Some Mayan prophecies were eerily accurate. They spoke of droughts that archaeology later confirmed. They described foreign invasions that indeed arrived. Did the shamans truly step into the future, or did they simply see patterns that others ignored? For the people, it did not matter. When a shaman declared that the next season would bring famine, farmers planted cautiously. When he said war would come, warriors sharpened their blades. Prophecy shaped reality, whether or not the visions were real. Today we still have our time travelers, futurists, scientists, writers, all peering into what lies ahead, sometimes right, sometimes wildly wrong. The Mayans remind us that prophecy is not about certainty, but about courage. The courage to imagine tomorrow, even when today feels overwhelming. Among the Mayans, children were not simply born into families, they were born into prophecies. The day of birth, recorded carefully in the sacred calendar, determined a child's destiny. Priests would examine the date, consult the gods, and announce whether the newborn would be a warrior, a healer, a farmer, or perhaps doomed to tragedy. Imagine being a mother, cradling your infant as a priest whispers, "This one will bring joy," but also sorrow. From that moment on, every step of the child's life is measured against prophecy. If the boy is clumsy with weapons, people murmur, "Ah, but he was not born for war." If he heals someone by chance, the whispers grow, "See, the prophecy was right." These destinies were not vague. The Mayan calendar was complex, with 20-day signs and 13 numbers cycling together, producing unique patterns for every birth. Each combination carried meaning, some auspicious, some ominous. A child born under the sign of Ik might be gifted in speech, while one born under Kimi was thought destined for struggles with death. But here's the paradox: prophecy shaped reality. If a child was told he was destined to be a warrior, he was trained harder, praised for courage, excused for recklessness. If a girl was told she would be a healer, she was taught herbs and chants. Prophecy became self-fulfilling, sculpting lives from cradle to grave. Humor, too, found its place. Imagine a young man shrugging off failure in love with, "What do you expect? My birth sign is literally doomed romance." Even then, people laughed, using prophecy not only as a burden but as an excuse. And does not that echo today? We may not consult Mayan priests, but we check horoscopes, personality tests, genetic predictions. We still let calendars and signs tell us who we are. The Mayan children of prophecy remind us of a universal truth. Identity is always shaped by stories we inherit, whether written in stars, in numbers, or in the quiet hopes of our parents. Few prophecies chilled the Mayans more than those of hunger. They depended on maize, corn, for survival. Maize was not just food, it was identity. They believed humans were literally made from maize dough, shaped by gods, so when prophecies warned of maize failing, of fields turning barren, it was not just starvation they feared. It was the undoing of humanity itself. Imagine walking through fields where green stalks should stretch tall, but instead you see dust, cracked earth, and shriveled plants. The priest raises his hands and declares, "The gods withhold their gift." Panic spreads. Families hoard what little grain remains. Children cry at night from hunger. The prophecy is no longer words. It is daily life. And archaeologists confirm this terror. Studies of Mayan soil show long droughts, years where rains failed, where crops withered. Cities collapsed not only from war but from famine. Prophecies of endless hunger were fulfilled again and again, written not in ink but in empty stomachs. Humor, dark as it was, sometimes emerged. Imagine a villager muttering during drought, "Well, at least I will finally lose weight." Gallows humor helped them endure. Fear without laughter is unbearable. But here's the deeper truth. Hunger reshaped society. It toppled kings, sparked migrations, fueled wars. A prophecy of famine was not only about food. It was about power. Who controls grain controls people. Priests used prophecy to explain scarcity as divine will, while rulers used it to justify conquest of neighboring lands. Hunger became prophecy, and prophecy became politics. Does that not echo today? We fear supply chains breaking, crops failing under climate change, prices rising beyond reach. We do not need Mayan priests to tell us that hunger still rules destiny. The prophecy of endless hunger is not past, it is present. Perhaps the most famous Mayan prophecy of all is the one the world misunderstood, the end of the calendar in 2012. For years, people across the globe panicked. Books were written, movies made, survival bunkers stocked, all because of a carved stone that seemed to say time itself would stop. But the truth is more nuanced. The Mayan long count calendar was cyclical, not linear. December 21, 2012 marked the end of one great cycle. 13 Baktuns and the beginning of another. To the Mayans, it was not the apocalypse, it was renewal. Imagine the humor of a Mayan priest seeing our modern panic. You thought the world would end. No, it is just a new calendar page. It is like mistaking December 31st for the end of existence, rather than the start of January. The prophecy was never about destruction, it was about rebirth. And yet, there is wisdom in our fear. The end of a cycle is unsettling. It forces us to ask, what if this really is the end? What if tomorrow is different in ways we cannot control? Fear of 2012 was not only about Mayan prophecy, it was about our own anxieties, climate change, war, technology spiraling out of control. We projected our fears onto their calendar. In that way, the prophecy fulfilled itself. The Mayans predicted transformation. And indeed, 2012 marked a turning point for many. Social media exploded. Politics shifted. Disasters increased. A new cycle did begin. Not of fire raining from the sky, but of human change. The final calendar reminds us that prophecy is often misunderstood. It is less about doom, more about rhythm. Time does not end, it turns. And in every ending lies a beginning, waiting for us to see it not with fear, but with courage. The Mayans left behind thousands of stones, temples, carvings, and whispers, but perhaps their greatest prophecy was never carved in stone. It was this: prophecy itself never ends. As long as human beings look to the sky, the earth, and their own hearts, we will always create visions of tomorrow. Imagine standing in a ruined Mayan city today. Jungle vines wrap around broken temples. Monkeys swing where priests once stood. The ball courts are silent, but the air hums with memory. You close your eyes and you can almost hear it, the echo of drums, the chant of priests, the murmur of prophecy. It is as though time itself lingers here, refusing to die. The Mayans spoke of cycles, of endings that become beginnings. And maybe that is their final gift to us, a way to see history not as a line that ends, but as a circle that continues. They knew civilizations rise and fall. They knew hunger comes, then rain. They knew stars vanish, then return. Theirs was not a prophecy of despair, but of rhythm. And here is the haunting part. Their stories still live because we still need them. When we fear climate change, we are reliving the prophecy of silent forests. When we watch wars erupt, we echo the prophecy of Venus and wandering stars. When we panic about technology or pandemics, we are fulfilling the prophecy of endless hunger and black skies. The Mayans are not gone, they are speaking through us. There is humor in this too. Imagine a Mayan priest peering at us with confusion. You have satellites, computers, telescopes that can see galaxies. And you still panic over calendars. Truly, some things never change. The laughter reminds us that fear is universal across centuries. But prophecy is not meant to paralyze. It is meant to awaken. The Mayans wanted their people to prepare, to honor the gods, to survive. And perhaps that is what we must do too. Not sacrifice hearts on pyramids, but sacrifice greed, waste, and blindness. Not pray for light to return, but create it ourselves. So as this journey closes, I want to thank you for walking with me through the shadows of time, through the forests, temples, and skies of the Mayans. And now I want to ask you something. If you could write one prophecy for the future of humanity, what would it be? Would it be hopeful? Would it be dire? Or would it, like the Mayans, remind us that every ending is also a beginning? Before you drift into sleep, take a moment, like this video, tell me where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe if you have not already. And please leave a comment below. Share your prophecy or tell me which Mayan story tonight struck you the most. because in sharing we continue the cycle. The prophecy never ends.